Hello and welcome back to Dueling Grounds. Today I'm playing Rograkh and Ikra at the request of our Patreon supporter Tim. And Tim, if this goes badly, it's your fault. Now I love Storm. Storm is probably my favourite archetype across every format, but I've been focusing all my Storm concentration on flubs, so I barely know how Roglines work. I played against it once, maybe twice. I did some practice games in MTGO before this league, and it gave me a bit of false confidence, but I decided to just jump straight into the league. Round 1, we're up against High Bay, a deck I've been messing around with myself, which means I know exactly how bad this round can go for me. My opening 7 is bad. The Vale of Summer's tempting, but the hand just isn't really doing anything, so back it goes. We go to 6, and this one's a lot better. Pyroblast gives us a bit of protection, and Thoughtseize will let us know what we're up against. Street Wraith goes to the bottom. My opponent opens the game with a basic plains, and I immediately just think ManaTraders. I lead on Woodford Hills, fetch for a bad lands, and cast Thoughtseize. My opponent kindly decides I don't need to lose 2 life. My prediction was correct, and they ManaTraders my Thoughtseize. They follow up with an Undercity Sewers, keeping a card on top, which I am not happy to see. I draw a Mishra's Bauble, crack it to see what their secret is, and it's an Ephemerate, which is clearly a very good card of their commander. I can cast a greedy freebooter, who exists solely to die for value, and he understands this. I play Dwarven Runes tapped, they play Marsh Flats and pass, I swing in for a damage, then Deadly Dispute the freebooter. Strike it rich on top. I think about it and decide it's not really what I need right now. They then crack a Marsh Flats for Bayou and flash in Opposition Agent. This is quite rude of them, especially because I'm holding on to 2 tutors, and I proceed to draw into a 3rd. But we're not dead. I've got a win condition, some interaction, and a dream. They pass, I draw Cabal Ritual, play Pantamperism with 2 counters, and pass back. End step, they fetch Flooded Strand into Meticulous Archive, once again leaving something on top. They hit me and pass. I draw Skull Clamp, and now it's time to think. I need 2 more cards in the graveyard for Threshold. I could Clamp Rograkh, I could cast a Tutor just to bump up Storm, but that gives my opponent a card. Lots of bad ideas on the table, but eventually I find the line. Sacrifice Dwarven Runes. Threshold is now at 6. I cast Mausoleum Secrets. My opponent can get the card from my deck, but it has to be a black card of CMC 1 or less, and I don't think there's anything in there that can stop me. They get Culling the Weak in the end. I cast the Cabal Ritual, getting 5 black mana. Use 1 of it to cast the Skull Clamp. Then I cast the most important card in my whole deck, Rograkh. Storm count at 4, I cast Stormscale Scion. I've got 1 mana left after this. My opponent responds by flashing in a Tachana's Tidebinder, attempting to stifle the Storm trigger, but I have a Pyroblast. My opponent reads the Pyroblast and concedes not just the game, but the round. So we start the league 1-0. I somehow win a matchup that I thought would be miserable, using a deck that I barely understand. I'm still not confident in the list, but I'm having an excellent time pretending I know what I'm doing. Round 2, and it's a mirror match, which always worries me when I'm playing a deck that I'm not that familiar with, as normally the most skilled player wins, and I'm definitely not a skilled Rograkh pilot. My 7 does nothing, so easy mulligan. The 6 is hard to evaluate, only 1 land, but there's a Spirit Guide and some cards that let us dig for lands. I'd probably mulligan this if it was a 7, but at a 6 I don't really want to go to 5, so I bottom the Fury, as this isn't really the right matchup for it. My opponent leads with an Urborg. I play an Arid Mesa and crack it for a Tiger. I probably should have just played Urborg and saved the fetch for later, but I Thoughtseize my opponent, and they cycle a Troll in response, grabbing themselves a Raucous Theatre, powerful new addition to Magic. Their hand doesn't seem too worrying, and I take the Thoughtseize as I feel particularly weak to it at the moment. My opponent plays their Raucous Theatre and surveils away a Grief. I untap and play my Urborg, making all lands swamp squared, and cast a Resentful Revelation. We're a long way from casting Peer into the Abyss, and Bolt doesn't seem great here, so I take the Impulsive Pilferer that pairs nicely with the Diabolic Intent I drew for turn. My opponent plays a Sandstone Needle and passes. I draw a Polluted Delta and start thinking through my options. I crack the Delta for a Badlands and cast Greedy Freebooter's Goblin Cousin and immediately kill him off so I can tutor. I have 8 cards in my graveyard, so Cabal Ritual feels great here as it sets me up for a potential win next turn. My opponent casts a Mausoleum Secrets to find a black card with CMC 2 or less. I'm not sure if they're going to try pushing or stopping me. They grab a Duress, which they immediately cast targeting me. I panic a bit. Losing Cabal Ritual here sets me back at least a turn. It means I'm going to need to dig with the Tainted Pact. But my opponent decides I can keep the Cabal Ritual and instead discards the Tainted Pact. I draw a Wishful Talisman and proceed to cast the most important card in my deck first. I then cast Cabal Ritual, follow it up with a Wishclaw Talisman. No need to activate it here, as I get to cast Stormscale Scion, which enters with 3 of his buddies. My opponent untaps, sacks the Sandstone Needle to cast a Desperate Ritual, getting 3 mana, which they use to cast a Jessica's Will. They don't find anything, and they concede. So we're up a game, and I'm feeling good so far. I'm not sure if our 7 is keepable, but I kind of want to see if it pans out, so I decide to keep it anyway. Our opponent leads with an Ebon Stronghold. We play a Windswept Heath and crack it for a Bayou. We run out a Springleaf Drum and then cast the most important card in our deck. Then we tap the most important card in our deck for a black mana so we can cast a Greedy Pirate. Our opponent plays a Tiger and taps out for a Sylvan Library. We untap, play our powerful new addition to Magic and surveil a Pyretic Ritual into the bin. Tap out and cast Pillage the Bog. Maybe it would have been better to play the Swamp this turn and plot the Pillage. I'm not sure, honestly, I haven't cast this spell before. I don't really want to take a land here, and end up taking the Abrupt Decay to deal with the Sylvan Library. It might have been better to take the Rite of Flames, but I'm not sure. Let me know what you think in the comments. I take my free attack and put my opponent down to 17. Our opponent untaps and decides not to draw any additional cards with Sylvan Library. They Thoughtseize us and take the card that they should have taken in game 1. They then play a Commercial District, keeping a card on top. I untap and draw a Lake of the Dead. I cycle over Troll, grabbing a Blood Crypt for some reason, even though my Badlands is still in the deck. I follow this up by traversing the Ulvenwald. I'm honestly not sure what I'm supposed to be tutoring for here, but I realise Lake of the Dead taps for 4 mana and Grief costs 4 mana, so I go with that. As planned, I play Lake of the Dead, sack all my other lands and cast a Grief. My opponent's hand doesn't look capable of winning at the moment, which I'm relieved to see. I take the Flare of Duplication, as it's pretty busted with Rograkh. I take my free attack again. My opponent untaps, doesn't draw with Sylvan Library again, and suspends a Profane Tutor. I know their hand, so I Inquisition them, taking the Redirect Lightning. This clears the way for me to Abrupt Decay my opponent's Sylvan Library without it backfiring. I swing in for 4, combat is starting to feel like my only chance of winning this game. Sandstone Needle and pass from our opponent. Galvanic Charge doesn't really do anything here, so I swing in for 4 again. Profane Tutor comes off suspend and our opponent grabs something I'm sure I'll be sad to see. Prepare Badlands, cast Crop Rotation, sacrificing the Commercial District to search for a Raucous Theatre. They then tap out for a bunch of dragons, and I have to say, it doesn't feel fun being on this side of the table. I discharge my freebooter to let me look a card deeper. I don't think I have anything, but you always play to your outs. Untap, and I draw nothing. Time to go to game 3. Game 3 on the play, not very happy with all my decisions in game 2, but trying to focus on this game. My 7 is bad, 1 land and no black source, easy mulligan. So, I'm tempted by the potential of this hand, and I keep a bad hand. The power of the Surveil lands is like a siren song that I can't resist. I play Commercial District, surveilling Diabolic Intent into the bin, then cast an Unmask, pitching the Pillage of the Bog, as everything else in my hand feels too important to discard. My opponent's 7 is a much more reasonable keep than mine. I take the Sylvan Library, but looking back, it feels like it might not have been the right call. My opponent also surveils turn 1, milling a Storm card I'm not playing in my deck, meaning that I've been outstormed. I untap, draw a Pyroblast, and start to hate myself for keeping this hand. Windswept Heath from my opponent, which they crack for a Tiger. They cast the most important card in their deck, before immediately killing it for a couple of cards and a treasure. I draw a black source and I get way too eager. I start thinking, but I stop thinking way too soon. I cast Rograkh, then sacrifice him to cast Culling the Weak for 4 black mana, and I choose not to put Rograkh into the command zone. I use 3 of this mana to cast Yawgmoth's Will, then from my graveyard I recast Rograkh, and then I recast Culling the Weak from my graveyard for 4 more mana. Storm count is 5, and I mess up even more by deciding that now is the time to cast Tendrils of Agony. I don't cast the Worldly Tutor first, so that I can cast it in my opponent's end step, but this is as dumb, as casting it now will drain my opponent for an extra 2 life. Honestly, this wasn't even a good line in the first place. I shouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing this turn. God damn it, Ryan, why are you... My opponent untaps and plays a Polluted Delta, then taps 2 mana for a Pentad Prism. In their end step, I cast a Worldly Tutor and grab an Orcish Bowmasters, feeling it's my only possible chance of winning this game. I draw Bowmasters for turn and pass. My opponent cracks their Delta for a Raucous Theatre in my end step, then untaps and passes the turn. End step, I flash in the Bowmasters. My opponent sees my Orcish Bowmasters, and they raise me an Orcish Bowmasters. I obviously don't feel great here, so I swing in with my Orc army, causing an Orc army massacre. I play a Wishclaw Talisman and I pass, and all I can think about is how if I cast the Worldly Tutor before the Tendrils, my opponent would be at 3 right now, and tutoring a Lightning Bolt would be lethal. my opponent casts a Crop Rotation and then a Shambling Ghast, and hey, they don't cast a Storm Scale Scion, instead playing a different Storm spell, giving this video its first non-Storm Scale win. So that round was frustrating. I made more misplays than I'd have liked, but I wasn't going to let that get me down. The deck is really fun to pilot, and I'm having a blast trying to figure it out. And if you want to try figuring it out yourself, without spending hundreds of pounds buying the cards, then you can do so with a ManaTraders rental account. Make sure to use code Dueling_Grounds_New Year for 40% cash back on your third month, and to help support the show. Anyway, moving on to round 3. So round 3, and before we can see what we're up against, MTGO crashes. I panic, because this hasn't happened to me during a league before, but I managed to reconnect, having only taken 3 minutes of clock damage. We see that my opponent is playing Uharis the Stormspinner, which is the last deck I did an MTGO league with, if you haven't seen the video already. I'm on the play. I don't love R7, but I keep it mainly for the Inquisition. I shock myself with a Blood Crypt and Inquisition my opponent. Okay, now I'm scared. This looks like a really good Spiderman hand. Wild Ride is their combo card, Clout is a lot of value, Consult digs for whatever they want, and Pyrogoyf is a threat in its own right. I take the Wild Ride to try and make their hand slightly less explosive. They play a Fiery Islet and pass. I draw Crystal Vein, play a Windswept Heath, and then cast a Strike It Rich. Riverfire Verge from our opponent, and I crack my Windswept Heath in their end step to grab a Commercial District. I see a Springleaf Gem on top, but decide it's not really what I want right now. I play a land and cast Pillage the Bog. Again, maybe I should have plotted this turn and cast it next turn to see more cards. I don't know if I've been using this card wrong. I see 6 exciting cards, but my choice is really between the Abrupt Decay and the Red Elemental Blast. Abrupt Decay can't be countered, but I choose Red Elemental Blast as I can use it to protect my combo as well as disrupt my opponent. My opponent plays an Expressive Iteration, and I consider Red Elemental Blasting it, as if they're digging for a land, it could be good to deny them that opportunity, but decide it's safer to hold on to it. They exile a Prismatic Vista with the Iteration and play it for turn. I play a Crystal Vein and I start to think, but decide this isn't the turn to try to push, and instead I flashback Strike It Rich. In my end step, my opponent sacrifices Prismatic Vista to grab a mountain, then they untap and play an island. Tap 2 lands to cast their commander. I consider countering it, but decide I want to try and get the Clout of the Dominus out of my opponent's hand, so I let it resolve. My opponent tries to Reckless Charge their commander, and I respond with Red Elemental Blast. I don't know why I didn't wait a little longer and see if they tried to play Clout of the Dominus as well. Definitely a misplay for me, but the blast resolves and the spider is slain. I untap and it's storm time, baby. I start by casting Rograkh, then I ask Gristlebrand for a favour and he rewards me with a big dragon and a free black mana. I cast Rite of Flame, then I throw Rograkh off a cliff, realise I have enough mana to recast Rograkh, and all of this culminates in a fuck ton of dragons. Game 2, and I think my 7 looks good. Even better, my opponent mulligans to 5, this game should be ours. I play a Bayou and cast Greedy Freebooter. My opponent considers in response throwing away a mountain. They untap and play a Riverfire Verge before passing the turn. I take my free attack, then cast a Duress. My opponent flashes in a Fairy Mastermind. Then they cast a Daze, leaving me confused. I crack my fetch and grab a Badlands so I can pay for the Daze. There's an Into the Floodmoor and a Tail's End in my opponent's hand. Tail's End is the easy choice here as it can stifle my Storm triggers. My opponent plays the island I know about and hits me in the face. I draw Galvanic Discharge, swing in for a 3 point of damage, and then play a Snow-Covered Swamp. I just pass here, holding up Galvanic Discharge if needed. I discharge the Mastermind, and my opponent casts a Uharis, making me wish I hadn't just used my Galvanic Discharge. In the end step, Uharis hits me in the face for 2 damage. I draw a Jessica's Will, try to cast some spells, realise my clock isn't moving, and my client crashes again. This time it takes me more than 3 minutes to try and fix the issue, and by the time I've logged back in, I see that I've been given a game loss. So, I'm a bit frustrated by that outcome. I know I was misplaying in Game 2, but I felt like I still had a chance of winning, and I'm annoyed I didn't even get to try again in Game 3. But it's not over yet, I still have 2 more rounds to go. Round 4, and I'm against Azusa. My 7 is pretty bad, the 6 is even worse. I go to 5, and it looks like we're on the Grief Beatdown plan again. I bottom the Tiger and the Pentad Prism. I shock myself with the Blood Crypt and run out a Greedy Freebooter. My opponent plays a Verdant Catacombs and passes. I draw a Crop Rotation, but it doesn't change my plans. I played Dwarven Ruins tapped and cast Culling the Weak, sacrificing the Greedy Freebooter. I use the 4 mana to cast Grief. I take the Sighing Mocha Spawn here, leaving them with a bunch of lands in a Sylvan Scrying. My opponent cracks Verdant Catacombs for a forest, plays another forest, and casts a Sylvan Scrying, searching for a Dusked Bowl. I untap, draw an Unmask that I can't cast, and swing in for free. My opponent untaps, plays an Eldrazi Temple, and taps out for an Azusa. They play another forest and a Temple of the False God. I untap and draw an Overgrown Tomb. I swing in for another 3 damage and play the Overgrown Tomb for turn, shocking myself. I tap out and do something I never thought I'd do in this league. I cast Ikra, the Usurper. Perhaps I'm crazy, but I'm starting to feel like with a bit of luck I might just be able to pull this off. Dust Bowl for my opponent and they tap out for a Kozilek's Command, making 5 spawns and scrying 5 cards. Then they tap out to Dust Bowl our Blood Crypt. I want to draw any black card here so I can unmask whatever they grab with Kozilek's Command, and I do in fact draw a black card. I start by swinging both my creatures, putting my opponent to 7. I unmask my opponent, Summoner's Pact and a Conduit of Worlds. I take the Summoner's Pact, leaving my opponent with just a Conduit of Worlds and no non-land cards they can cast with it. My opponent untaps, casts the Conduit of Worlds, replays the Verdant Catacomb several times, grabbing some forest and eventually a Gingerbread Cabin. My chances of winning start to feel a little bit slimmer. They Dust Bowl targeting my Overgrown Tomb, but I crop rotation in response. I grab a Raucous Theatre and surveil an Arid Mesa into the bin. My opponent plays a world map and passes. I draw a Worldly Tutor, swinging with the team. My opponent double blocks the Grief, then sacks for Scions for mana to crack their food. My opponent untaps, I get ready to concede, but want to see what they're tapping out for. And yeah, I concede. Game 2, I'm not feeling too bad. The multi-5 was desperate, and I was surprised by how close it got me. My 7 looks good, can make a lot of mana and has a tutor when I need it. I lead with the Commercial District, surveilling a Sandstone Needle to the top. My opponent plays a forest and enchants it with a Wild Growth. I play a Windswept Heath and crack it for a Bayou, then tap out for a Squandered Resources. War Room for my opponent to an Azusa. Our opponent then moves to combat, which I think is a bit of a misplay, as they give me priority and an opportunity to cast a Snuff Out if I had one. Part of the strength of Azusa is that once she enters you can play 2 lands immediately without giving your opponents a chance to respond. After combat, they go Forest Beseiju into an Expedition map. I play the Sandstone Needle tapped, then cast for Wishclaw Talisman. My opponent untaps, sacrifices the Expedition map to find an Arid Archway, plays the Arid Archway, returning Beseiju to their hand, then activates Beseiju to blow up our Wishclaw Talisman. Beseiju allows me to get a Raucous Theatre from my deck, and I surveil a Phyrexian Tower into my graveyard. My opponent plays a Vesuva as a copy of Arid Archway and bounces and replays a forest. They hit me with Azusa and pass. I cycle Generous End to find an Underground Mortuary, which I play for turn, surveilling a Demonic Tutor to the top of my deck. I then tap out for an Unmask, and here I think I make a mistake. I take the Summoner's Pact as I'm worried about it getting an Emrakul, but they don't actually have Emrakul mana here, and prime time, it's prime time. My opponent untaps and plays prime time, uses its ETB to grab a Gutless Ruins and a Petrified Field. They bounce Petrified Field with the Guildless Commons, then play it for turn. They sack the field to get back a Beseiju, hit me from 1 and then pass for turn. In my upkeep, they Beseiju my Squandered Resources. I'm assuming they waited here so that if I get a Surveil, it'll enter tapped, but I get a Badlands instead. I feel like I have a window, so I cast Crop Rotation, grabbing a Crystal Vein. Demonic Tutor grabs the Stormscale Scion. I cast Rograkh from the command zone, then cast a Poetic Ritual. Galvanic Discharge Azusa, both to up my Storm count and because I hate Hatsune Miku. Then, with a Storm count of 5, I feel like Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones and make a bunch of dragons. My opponent only has 1 card in hand, but I know Prime Time can grab Glacial Chasm to stall for time. My opponent untaps, attacks, and doesn't get a Glacial Chasm, instead of going a Pit of Offerings and a Talon Gates to phase out their Prime Time. I'm very confused as to what's going on, and then my opponent taps out and casts an All Is Dust, and I will never recover from this. So, I'm 1-3, which is not where I want to be. I still feel like round 3 could have been a win, and round 4 was heartbreaking. And even more unfortunately, I appear to have either forgotten to record my final round, or I saved it to the wrong place on my laptop, so I can't show you the final round, but I was paired against MNR2 and I lost 0-2. Apologies for all the technical errors in this video, I'm going to keep trying to improve, and if you feel like giving me a chance, please leave a like and subscribe. Thank you for checking the video out, have a great rest of your day.